And what would it look like as a planet to look at our dream health? I've had this dream for years and years and years that sometime in the not too distant future there will be a 4 or 5 year global conference involving leaders from all over the world, not just political leaders, not just religious leaders, but psychologists, anthropologists, sociologists, economists, ecologists, who will look at how we've been doing life on planet Earth. And at the end of that global conference, there will be a vote in which each species gets one vote, including the human species. And that the other species will be represented by shamans who will literally dress up in the paraphernalia of the species they're representing, and that there will be a vote in which one species, one vote. And we figure out how do we redo life on planet Earth so that everybody, every species can come to the table of God's largesse. That is the dream I have as a planet. That's what a planetary health would look like at a dream level. And at an emotional level, what is the emotional body of the planet? I really believe that just like human beings have many different levels to the self, there's the physical self, there's the etheric self, there's the astral self, there's the mental self, there's the causal self, there's Atman, and there's Brahma consciousness. The planet itself has those levels. There is a physical body to the planet that we call the physiosphere, the rock, third rock from the sun. There's an atmosphere around it. I believe also that this atmosphere is like the emotional body of the planet. Naturally, it's under the influence of the physiosphere. Earthquakes happen and tornadoes happen, but I'm convinced that at least some of the energy for earth changes and earth disturbances have to do with the stressors Gaia is under because of the mismanagement of the human species. That the emotional health of our planet, to some extent, is dependent upon the actions of human beings, and that we need to clean up our act as a human species in order to have some influence on the climatological changes and the atmospheric changes and the geological changes that our world is experiencing. That's what it would look like at a fourth category. And a fifth one, what would it look like if I just took the physical globe itself and physical safety? What would that look like? I want to focus on one piece of it. I think there may be a need for a military presence on our planet, but not a military presence acting at the behest of any particular one group of people and imposing their will on others, grabbing resources and protecting resources that they now claim to be their own. That is not the purpose of the military. The military would be peacekeepers. And I would take the United Nations Security Council, I would disband it, and I would create instead a council of grandmothers. That all, and I'm deadly serious, that any decision to use military means to intervene anywhere in the world in order to keep peace would be a decision made by this council of grandmothers who would make the decision it is appropriate to intervene in this circumstance. And it would not be about grabbing resources or protecting resources. So that's what the physical safety of our planet would look like to me. When I look at what would the social welfare of our planet look like, it would look like to me as if the relationships we have are relationships predicated on love. I worked in Africa for 14 years, and I saw the extraordinary corruption that goes on. When people in first world countries send aid to third world countries, here's what tends to happen a lot of the time when they're working from government through government, instead of through NGOs, non-governmental organizations. Somebody put it very tritely one time. He said, international aid is a system whereby poor people in rich countries give money to rich people in poor countries. And there's a lot of truth in it. I'll give you one glaring example. The first mission I lived in Kenya was a mission called Njoro. And about 3 miles from Njoro was a big college called Edgerton College. It was an agricultural college which has since become a university. And the Dutch government had poured a lot of money into this college. And there was one of the faculty was a Dutch professor who was a good friend of mine. He came to Mass every Sunday in the mission. And he told me at one stage that the Dutch government had given a gift of 1,000 prime bulls to Kenya to try to upgrade the local stock, because the local stock don't give a whole lot of meat and a whole lot of milk. They gifted 1,000 prime Frisian bulls to Kenya to distribute throughout the country and upgrade the stock. And my Dutch friend told me, they arrived, and Jomo Kenyatta, who was the president in Kenya at that time, took 200 of them for himself. And then 700 more were distributed to his members of his cabinet. Each guy got 5 or 6 or whatever. And then 100 of the 1,000 actually got to go out where it was intended. And this friend of mine, who was in charge of the party, he was totally aware of it. He tried to object, and he was told, either you want to upgrade the stock, you're happy that at least 100 got out there, or we'll give the gift back. So his hands are tied. What can he do? And so this notion that that you give aid, but it's the poor people in this country who can ill afford it, giving money to the rich people in the poor countries so they can self-aggrandize. I've got a similar belief system around the taxation process in our country. It feels to me that taxation is a system whereby the wealth is distributed so that the billionaire corporations don't pay any taxes, whereas the middle class, share their earnings with the poor, which is okay, but they give their sweat to the rich. And that's the system in which we're laboring right now. And so definitely when I look at the planet as it moves towards Christ consciousness, there needs to be a major shift in our economic models. At the moment, in a typical organization, the wage discrepancy between the executive class and the guy sweeping the floor, at the moment, the last figures I saw were 300 to 1. The CEO in a typical organization is earning 301 times more per hour than the guy sweeping the floor. And he may not be putting any more time into it. But that kind of discrepancy we can't sustain. There needs to be a total look at our economic models as we do life on planet Earth. And finally, how would our mission look like as a planetary system? I shared with you again a vision of years and years and years ago where I saw a great soul stand in front of the presence of God. I'm going to call that great soul Gaia, and make a promise that she would energize the third rock from the sun in this particular solar system and would continue to throw up life forms until finally she managed to throw up a life form that would recognize its own divinity and ipso facto the divinity of all other life forms. And she spent 3.7 billion years in that process, starting off with single-cell creatures, and then multicellular organisms, and then the great sea creatures, and then the amphibians, and then the reptiles, and then the mammals, and then the primates, and then the hominids, and then Homo erectus, and then Homo sapiens, and then Homo sapiens sapiens, and finally, beginning about 2,500 years ago, she began to throw up what I've called Homo spiritualis, beginning with people like Lao Tzu and Confucius in China, and Mahavira and the Buddha in India, and Zoroaster in Persia, and the great prophets of Israel, Jeremiah, and ultimately Jesus, and the great thinkers of Greece, Socrates and Plato, Aristotle. We're on the verge of this breakthrough into Homo spiritualis. But planet Earth desperately needs midwives in order for that to be a successful birth. Because I said to you some weeks ago that there's a danger that there will be a bifurcation point now, as there has been in the past. We'll either go into Homo spiritualis, a breakthrough into Christ consciousness and Buddha nature, or we'll go into what I've called Homo sociopathicus, which will be people just totally out for ourselves. We desperately need people on our planet, and groups on our planet, and thinkers on our planet, who will bring us safely into the stage of Homo spiritualis. We need desperately midwives.